Welcome to the history of England from 410 AD to just before the Norman invasion of 1066. Episode 8. Mercia advances. At one point or another, Dark Ages England was under the rule of one of the four main kingdoms. First Kent, then Northumbria, later Mercia, and eventually Wessex came to the fore. But East Anglia was a major force, and also Essex and Sussex played a role in this development. Collectively, they are known as the Heptarchy, but it is largely a word with no real meaning behind it. In some respects, what was happening in the Heptarchy was a melting pot of kingships and states vying with each other over a period of 200 years, and as many as perhaps 20 different regions or tribes. This early period witnessed the ebb and flow of power, along with very slow development in laws, and certainly a mingling of people who became less locally tribal. At the beginning of the 8th century, no one king seems to have been able to call himself Overlord or Bretwalda of the English. And then in 726, in Wessex, King Inne abdicated and went on a pilgrimage to Rome. There had been constant unrest within Wessex, and although he could win battles, it seems he couldn't win the respect of his people. Indeed, civil war broke out when he departed for Rome. At about this same time, Ethelbald took over the kingship of Mercia from Ceolred, also named Athelred, and saw his opportunity and seized the throne of Mercia by starting a war with Wessex, which was settled in 733 with Wessex seceding Somerton to Mercia. For 20 years, Mercia under Ethelbald consolidated its strength. According to Stenton, he is referred to in one document, 736, as Rex Britannia, which from the Latin to early English translates as Bretwalda, and meaning at this time wide ruler, so having other kings owe fealty to him. Indeed, at his mightiest, Wessex, Kent, Lindsey, and all kingdoms south of the Humber were in a loose confederation with him. He had come to the throne through his lineage with Penda, who had a brother called Eowa, and Athelbald was his grandson. He had been exiled and sought sanctuary with Guthlac of Crowland Abbey, while Ceolred was king. However, north of the Humber, Eadbert came to the throne in 756 and made an alliance with the Picts, and through this, moving westward and northward, had conquered Strathclyde, including the capital Dumbarton, which was known at the time as Alclude. Back in Mercia, Ethelbald had some years earlier been repulsed by Eadbert while trying to move his influence north, and in 752 fought a battle at Burford against Wessex and fled the field. He then also lost the Battle of Secundum. Ethelbald ruled as a tyrant, but had peace in his kingdom because of it. Likewise, he seems to have lived as a tyrant. Boniface, who had gone as an English missionary to Germany, wrote to Ethelbald thanking him for his generous alms which supported his mission, but in the same letter reprimanding him for his violation with women who had taken holy orders, and the example it gave to his subjects. It seems our Ethelbald had a penchant for nuns. We can see from this correspondence and the subsequent actions of the king that the church and Christian values were now taken very seriously among the ordinary people, enough to influence a king's actions. Also, the letter inferred Ethelbald was not above taking money or goods from churches when he needed it, and not as regular taxes. But he seems to have been suitably chagrined because in 749, sometime after, he issued a charter which freed the churches of all public obligations, with the exceptions of bridge maintenance and fortress upkeep. This also tells us that the church was becoming influential in pastoral life, and that it was a sure way of raising taxes, probably through tithes. Through all of this time, Ethelbald was increasing his influence with his neighbouring kingdoms, and seems to have acquired parts of Essex, namely London and Middlesex. By the end of his reign, Ethelbald could command what could be described as a loose confederacy, not dissimilar to the one that Ethelfrith and Edwini had constructed about 150 years earlier in Northumbria. In 757, Ethelbald appears to have been responsible for a stabbing on behalf of a Mercian abbess. So no surprises there then. Well, if we don't have pirates, at least we have dissolute nuns. The abbess, as a consequence, received some lands. This information again comes via St Boniface. This may have been the reason why a short time later Ethelbald's bodyguard, under cover of darkness, murdered him. Civil war promptly broke out. A bloke called Beornred, who, grasping his chance, appears to have been the nominated heir to the throne, led a major faction within Mercia, and Offa, son of Thingfrith, who in turn was the son of Eanwulf, was instigator at the head of an opposition party. We don't know by what lineage Beornred was able to make his bid for the kingship, but he must have been able to convince some because he had a following of some who supported him. His opposition, Offa, on the other hand, was related in the same descent as Ethelbald had been, that is, through Eowar. But Beornred was, according to Michael Wood, the nominated heir. Sir Frank Stenton has him as being obscure and says no more. Whatever the connections, in less than a year, Offa had driven Beornred into exile. However, the confederacy that Ethelbald had built up over his 41 years of reign dissolved, and Offa was left with just Mercia as his kingdom. In many ways, Ethelbald does seem to have made it easier for Offa to keep Mercia strong, although the other kingdoms which Mercia had dominated now reversed to their own sole rule. Offa was gradually able to make progress in bringing them back into his sphere of influence, but this did not happen overnight. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles at this time concentrate on Wessex, presumably because that is where they were written in the 9th century, and are looking back with near-sighted hindsight, if that makes sense. Sigebert was King of Wessex in 757 and is overthrown because of his unjust actions. Just what these unjust actions were, the ASC remains mute. Cynewulf is made King of Wessex, except Hampshire, which still belongs to Sigebert, until he killed the ealdorman who stayed with him longest, which stated, without further explanation, leaves unanswered questions, but does infer that this ealdorman had accompanied him into exile from the rest of Wessex. He is then driven by Cynewulf into the Weald, where a herdsman stabbed him to death, thus avenging his kinsman, the ealdorman Cumbra. This highlights the problem with our chief sources of information. Lots of outline, but very little in the way of definition, depth and detail. When you get some depth, it can be misleading. In the year 757, which the ASC lists as 755, the majority of the text is given up to an incident that happens in 773, involving a run-in with another Atheling or royal noble. According to the Peterborough manuscript of the ASC, in 741, here York burned down. What? All of it? Most of it? Does that include the church? We are left wondering. There is no further detail. One may surmise that the church of St Peter's was not burnt down by the fact it is not mentioned, but we would be wrong, as it did. Here, archaeology helping to fill in along with local Jorvik records. The ASC was started by King Alfred, but many a quillwright has endowed the work with their observations, some good, some bad, most with some enlightenment as to the times, but alas and alack, we are still very much in the dark. The same Peterborough manuscript has 743, here Ethelbald, King of Mercia, and Cuthred, King of Wessex, fought against the Welsh. The Winchester manuscript concurs. However, we are again left puzzled. Was this an incursion by the Welsh into Mercia, which was rebuffed? An agreement made between Ethelbald and Cuthred to raid Wales? Was there a specific reason? Had Cuthred come along willingly, or was he coerced through some other actions? One thing we can determine is that Mercia and Wessex were showing a united front, and later developments tell us Wessex was the liege of Mercia. But the simple statement leaves a lot of open questions, and this is the theme of why the Victorians called this the Dark Ages. Although today, the 8th century is not quite so dark. Bede, great historian that he was, left us mainly with an ecclesiastical information, some day-to-day life events and touches the politics, but we are reliant on mainly one person and his view of the world, a few thousand words from other monks who worked with him, so it is more like a brushwood torch rather than a candle that is Gildas glimmering in the gloom nearly 1300 years ago. Northumbria had a series of tyrants as kings. Kent had some kings, Ethelbert, Eadbert, Eadwulf, who were all joint rulers, and Wessex had weak kings. This left Mercia supreme. At this period, however, the history of this time was written by the descendants of Lindisfarne and its scholarly successors in the north, and Mercia is not regarded as powerful from their perspective, especially as they were brought south to Winchester by the time of the authorship in King Alfred's time, and by then Mercia was not the nucleus of events. King Offa took control of Mercia, and I have done a separate video on his reign. King Offa seems to have been just enough of an astute political animal to negotiate his way through the maze of Dark Ages intrigues. The immediate effect of Offa seizing the throne in 757 from Beornred after Ethelbald's death was that Northumbria refused to pay tribute and hold allegiance as it had before to the Bretwalda Ethelbald. But Offa rules Mercia well, and he builds Offa's dyke. The problem with fixed defences is they are just that. Offa seems to have held office as much by political as military stealth, and the dyke secured his western approaches from continuous assaults by the Welsh. But no sooner was this secured than a new threat to England emerged. Although fortunately for Offa, it was Northumbria that felt the first volley. In 793, Vikings assaulted Lindisfarne. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is suddenly prosaic. Here terrible portents came about in the land of Northumbria, and miserably afflicted the people. These were immense flashes of lightning, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the air, and there immediately followed a great famine. And after that, in the same year, the raiding of the heathen miserably devastated God's church in Lindisfarne Island by looting and slaughter. So just as a strong defence against the enemy, Offa's dyke, was constructed, the rules change and there was a threat from a different direction. Very slow at first, but as the gains outweighed the losses, the numbers of these Viking raids would increase. Northumbria was badly run by the late 8th century and the strength would shift to Wessex. But to the Vikings, England as a whole would prove rich pickings. The ASC tells us that the Viking raids did not come without any warning signs. There is a glimpse on the south coast of England in 789 when a reeve goes out to inquire why 3 Viking boats did not come ashore at Dorchester and report to the king. He rowed out to ask their business and was promptly killed. The Norsemen, when they went a Viking, were playing by different rules, ones that would prove both costly and change English society forever. That comes in an even later video. If you found this video gradely, please thumbs up. I publish new episodes every Monday with occasional bonus episodes, usually on a Thursday. Please comment and spread the word on social media outlets. Also hit the subscribe button and get the latest episodes notified to you. And ring that bellaroonis to get reminders. I would appreciate any recommendations on other media, Parler, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit or history forums. Thank you.